Time is 6:30 and we will call the regular Board of Education meeting to order and have roll call, please.
Dyke,
Present.
Walker,
Here.
Frisbee,
Here.
Maycumber. Here. Winnering. Here.
All present and accounted for. Agenda item 1 is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or corrections, Dr. Cox?
No.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. Roll call vote, please.
Winnering. Yes. Dyke,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Frisbee,
Yes.
Maycumber. Yes.
Motion carried 5-0. Agenda item 2 is to welcome the visitors. As we begin our agenda tonight, I'll explain our process for public comment. The board will hear comments from the public in conjunction with each agenda item using a structured process. As board president, I will ask for comments when we reach that item on the agenda. You will be asked to approach the microphone, state your name, and limit your comments to 2 minutes. At this time, I invite any member of the audience to step up to the microphone with comments about items of interest or concern that do not appear on tonight's agenda. Please begin by stating your name and contact information. It would be appreciated if you would limit your comments to 2 minutes so that we can keep the meeting moving in a timely fashion and allow others an opportunity to speak, as well as allowing the board to complete the full board agenda in a timely manner. Comments from the public are limited to matters within the board's authority. Please understand that we as a board cannot discuss items not already on the agenda. Iowa's Sunshine Law prohibits us from having a discussion without the proper notice to all of the school district community that the issue would be discussed at tonight's board meeting. Also, please remember, you are making comments in a public meeting. Should you make comments that the subject of the comments considers to be inflammatory or libelous, you as an individual may be subject to legal action brought by the subject of your comments. Thank you for your support of our school district. Are there any comments by the public at this time? Seeing no one approach the microphone, we'll move on to agenda item 3, comments by board members and superintendent, and we'll start off with Dr. Cox.
Thank you. I want to congratulate Mr. Boland, Mrs. McEnroy, and the Charles City High School art students on a fantastic art show on Thursday. If you haven't done so, stop out at the Art Center and take a look at their work. Also, the instructors have created a website to showcase student artwork, and you can follow them on Twitter at EmergentArtHS, or you can check out their work at emergentarths.com. This Friday, Governor Branstad will recognize the Charles City FFA with the Main Street, Iowa Best Partnership Award at a ceremony to be held in Des Moines. Mr. Jim Lundberg, the advisor, will be honored as the Charles City Volunteer of the Year. So congratulations to the FFA students and to Mr. Lundberg for their countless hours of work that they do to make Charles City a great community. We recognized our school volunteers on Thursday as well as part of the Chamber's annual ceremony. The recipients this year were Cheryl Blaine at Lincoln Elementary, Julie Mayhew at Washington, Kim Arndt at the middle school, and Terry and Becky Meyer at the high school. And we want to thank them and all of our school volunteers for the important work that they do on behalf of our students. And then finally, tickets are still available for this Saturday's Excellence in Education banquet. You can stop by central office or give us a call. You can also purchase tickets at one of the local banks in town.
Thank
Thanks.
you. I'll start off and talk a little bit about the Iowa Association of School Board workshop that we attended last week concerning strategic governance. And there were 2 pages out of that 2.5-hour session that I thought were of most importance, and I have printed them up, emailed them to you, and have a copy available for the board members. One talks about common messages and talking points of unifying the board to move forward, and they specifically talked about after voting on complex issues And on my page, I took the liberty of putting in parentheses also before, potentially, so that the board is unified and explains our process to the public and amongst ourselves when we deal with complex issues. And we all know we've had a lot of complex issues, and we're going to have more complex issues coming up in the near future and over the next couple of years. So that would be one thing. The other page, on the other side of what I gave you, talks about forecasting and identifying information needs. There's a series of questions on there that they had. Identifying information needs of the board as far in advance as possible. Their suggestion was to choose 3 or 4 of these questions the board might need to ask so that we're fully informed and the public is fully informed as we proceed to make these complex decisions. One thing that I did take the liberty of adding at the bottom of that page was something that I saw on Twitter this morning that I thought was appropriate as far as when I saw it, there was no one specific person that this quote came from. It was from one of the Twitter feeds that I follow. But it's, are you spending your time worrying about the way things were or creating the way things can be? And I think that is appropriate for us in all of our complex decisions and moving forward with the district. A lot of times we get caught up in the way things were and the way things are rather than how can they be in the future. So you have that at your disposal, and I did email you a copy, yes?
Yes.
Okay, and you have a printed copy. Also wanted to mention that I participated in the Back to School Day a week ago Friday at the high school. Spent 4 class periods following a junior around and attended classes that I never attended while in high school. None of the 4 did I attend. Went to band, went to Spanish, went to philosophy, and then surprisingly enough, I never took accounting in high school, but I spent a class period in accounting. So very eventful day. There's about 10 community members there and debriefed in the afternoon, and I think the high school is moving along great with this project and involving the community, and looking forward to see great things to come in the future out of those partnerships that we're building with our community members and businesses in town. So that would be my report. Anyone else have anything to say?
On Monday, this week has been a busy one, last week. Monday, Jim and I met with policy committee. We got through our bedtime reading binder and put some minor changes, and those will be presented to us the next meeting. We then followed up with food service, another visit with the food service meeting, our board training, and then I want to echo what Dr. Cox said about the art show. The level of maturity in our artists right now is phenomenal. And being from that world and living in that world on a daily basis, I'm really impressed, and it's really a treat to see the talent we have and how it's being developed. Also attended the play Friday night. How entertaining that was. Oh, it was a comedy. It was very funny, very entertaining. Again, a great group of talented kids. Linda Brandt, so congratulations to her on being awarded the Woman of the Year. I sit there in amazement thinking how many years, 30-some years she's been doing that, and the sets were beautiful. And for her to continue to have that drive to do such outstanding work is really, really, really good. And I know we're not going to be slowing down any, so onward we keep going this month. It's May, it's all close to May.
A lot going on and coming up in the future. Anyone else?
Oh, I think I've been on the same circuit as you guys too. I wasn't able to get to the art show sadly, but I'll go up and see some of their art at the Art Center. But since our last meeting, I think I had neglected, Robin and I had gone up to the lunch one day and had experienced Smart Lunch at the high school. And you know, that all looks like a very positive program for the students there, giving them a lot of flexibility, allow them to develop the maturity for some good time management in their studies. The tutoring, the additional tutoring with teachers is great. And you know, if a student doesn't feel that they need any of that on a particular day, they can opt to possibly just go to the gym or do some independent study. So it's all a great program, and you know, I hope that that'll continue on into the future.
Thank you. Jim or Jason?
Nope.
Yeah, everything's pretty well been covered.
Yep.
Okay. We'll move on to agenda item 4. It's the 2015-16 school calendar public hearing. So this would be the time when anyone may speak to the board in support of or against any portion of the 2015-16 school calendar. And just checking with the board secretary, we did publish the public hearing in accordance with the law. Have you received any written comments?
No written comments.
Is there anyone who would like to have written comments be considered or a verbal comment this evening on the proposed school calendar? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing and move on to agenda item 5, independent project-based learning class.
This time I'll invite Charles City High School senior Austin Turpin and Mr. Johnson to come forward. Austin will share an independent project-based learning class proposal and experience that he has undertaken.
Thanks for having us. I'm going to introduce Austin here while Mr. DeVore is getting set up. He's just going to have a couple of slides running through as he talks. Tonight, Austin Turpin he's a Charles City High School senior. He's going to talk to you a little bit about a project that him and I and a teacher of his have kind of been working on really for about the last couple months in terms of a way, some ideas that he has, some of the different ways that he learns, some of the different things that he's kind of soaking in over the course of the last couple years at the high school, and really brought him to me because of some of the different project-based learning discussions that we've had as a district, and that he kind of started with one of his teachers that I think he'll talk to you a little bit about. But very unique idea that he came with, and it's just kind of grew from an idea that he had for a particular class into something that he could really kind of leave his legacy at Charles City High School, and really it's been fun for me getting to know Austin a little bit more through this. If you don't know him, he's a little bit of a quieter kid. But we'd take about 475 more of them up there if we could, because he really gets down to business. He's very high academics, model student in a lot of different capacities. I told him I'd brag him up a little bit to hopefully bring his nerves down a little bit. But in all seriousness, he's a great asset to Charles City High School, and he's brought some really unique views on education, and look forward to listening to him tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. All right, so as all of you know, Charles City High School is moving towards a more applied approach to education. Project-based learning, or PBL for short, gets students away from book work and puts them in an environment where they can apply what they learn to a real-life project. As you could all imagine, finding a project that fits exactly into an already set curriculum with the pre-existing class is extremely difficult. So about 6 weeks ago, I took on a project of my own. and I would like to tell you guys about my experience as an independent project-based learner. So my project stemmed from a product idea I had a little over a year ago. Essentially, what my product would do was use wind energy to power the electrical components of a livestock trailer while also cooling the animals inside. At the time, I thought, oh yeah, that could be a cool idea, but I didn't do anything about it. I didn't think I could. I was just a high school student, right? So I forgot about it until about a year later, at the beginning of this school year, I learned about what project-based learning was and some of the incredible things that high school students were doing with it. For example, a group of high school students in a part of the Iowa Big School in Cedar Rapids are developing a waterborne drone that measures plastic waste levels in the oceans. So when I found out project-based learning was coming to our school, I saw it as an opportunity to take my education into my own hands.
So a little bit, just to give Austin a break to get towards the end of his discussion here. A lot of the discussions that he's heard, you heard him reference Iowa Big. He had a teacher that went there, and I think he'll reference her in a minute. But bringing those things together at Charles City has been kind of compartmentalized a little bit, so some teachers doing some different things in their classrooms, some students being exposed to the different opportunities that it brings. So Austin had a little bit of a unique experience with that. So as you can kind of hear, he's saying all the right things from the principal's perch right now in terms of taking a hold of his education, finding things that he's interested in. He's tapping into an interest that he had well over a year ago and trying to bring those to life. So those are things we want our students. We want our students to be looking outside the box just like we want our teachers. Reference Smart Lunch, giving them a little bit more responsibility and taking hold of what they need out of their education. So he's saying a lot of those things here because not only because they're the right things to say, but that's because this is the experiences that he's had, and we want to really try to model the experience that he's had as well. So he's going to wrap up and talk to you a little bit more specifically about the project, and then a proposal that him and I have kind of put together on top of this that I'll end with to explain just a little bit more.
So the first step to my project was planning. And in this stage, I had a lot of help from some of my teachers and especially Mr. Johnson. I had the idea in my head, but connecting it to a set curriculum and standards was something that I couldn't have done without their help. So I went to the Industrial Tech Department, the Math Department, and the English Department, where Mrs. McKeag played a huge role in helping this project move along. And I even went to the Business Department. I pitched my project to the teachers, and they gave me their input as to how my project could align with some of their standards. And all the teachers were very interested and eager to help me with this. So the next meeting I had with Mr. Johnson, I came back with a list of a little over 20 standards, and not just math, science, or engineering standards like you would expect with a project like mine, but standards from almost every single subject. That to me says a lot about project-based learning. And it also gave me a more realistic experience. But 20 standards is a little overambitious. So the next step was to streamline my plan and dissect it into just a few key standards that I could hit. Mr. Johnson was able to act as my guide, and he helped me narrow down my list to the more relevant standards to my project. He helped me see a more clear-cut plan of action, and he guided me to the next steps rather than lecturing me through them as with traditional education. So about a month and a half later of research, planning, and collaborating with my teachers, I encountered a problem that I didn't really expect. There was no way my project or my product would ever work. Basically, I thought of a way, a more complicated way to doing something that had already been done before. I need not get into the details why it didn't work, but take my word for it. It just wouldn't work. However, I would not consider my experience as an independent project-based learner a failure. See, there's a bigger project circumscribing my own personal project, and that is to make my experience more available to other high school students. I'm proposing to create a new class specifically designed for student interest project-based learning. In a class like this, the students would pick a project based solely on their own interests. The teacher's role in this classroom would be more to guide the student through this process, like Mr. Johnson, Mrs. McKeag, and Mr. Wedeking did for me. Once the student came up with a project they were interested in, they would come up with a proposal, they would pitch it to the teacher, and the student and the teacher would collaborate and come up with deadlines, key standards to hit, and things of that nature. So a class like this would give passionate students an opportunity to explore their interests and apply it to a real-world project. I hope you all can see the value in a class like this, and I hope that you guys can look for this in our future course book offerings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a little bit to elaborate on his proposal there. When he first came to talk to me in my office, he had said right towards the beginning, I think he might have even said the comment, I'd really like to leave a mark on Charles City High School. And then we got to talking about project-based learning and what he's experienced, and he was pretty open about the concept of he'd really like this to be offered as a class. And what really the inquiry with my end of it started with, what does it take to organize a class and to actually create a class and propose it? Does it go to the school board? Does it go to me? What does that process look like? So we started to talk through that, and then I just got more and more interested in what the project that he was taking on, and he shared with me the standards, and we broke down those things. But I have to tell you, every time that we met, and we probably met 4 or 5 times, we just had a hard time meeting up at times, but he came with a very clear sense of what project learning was and what it could do for him as a student, and it really amazed me. No offense to Austin, but just because I hadn't had a lot of conversations with students about the concept. I live and breathe this stuff. I love this stuff. This is why I'm in education. But to hear it come from a student really got me excited. And to hear him speak about it as intellectually as he does just shows you that this can offer our students a lot. So as we started to talk about how we might propose this as a class, we started reaching out to a couple of teachers about how that might look. We do have a tag, Naomi Yadoff over at the high school, that does some of these things with some tag students, but on a very really just hit or miss type of approach to it. We don't have something set where students know they can sign up for and this is what's going to happen. So we try to catch students like Austin when they come to us with proposals. So we're starting to put together how this might look if there was a teacher responsible. Since we met last, I've had a few developments with a couple of teachers that may have some time available to offer an independent project-based learning class during their school day. So we're looking on how that might come up, and Mrs. Yadoff is excited about it too, about how she can expand her offerings to outside of the TAG program. These talks would not have been happening right now if it weren't for Austin and his proposal that we've talked about here the last 6 to 7, I think it's been longer than 6 weeks, but whenever he came to me. So it's exciting, it's student-led, it's the right type of work, and I think we're gonna get a little bit of legs with this and keep going with and see how we can do that. And I really think Austin is gonna leave a pretty good legacy or leave a mark on Charles City High School. It's not every day you have a student knock on your door in the office and say, I'd like to propose a new class for you. And then it actually turns out. So, yeah, I'm sure they come up with some good classes, but yeah. So, hopefully you got a couple questions for him before we go, but I'm leaving this up to him. I appreciate your guys' time, and well done, bud.
Thank you.
I do. First of all, I will always hold against you the fact that you switched out of golf to track. I always enjoyed working with you. That was awesome. I wish they were all like you. Mr. Johnson hit on the first thing was that kind of talking about how this was an opportunity for you to take control of, your education. And I think high achievers will always succeed at that. This is something that, as much as I've read, is that this is an opportunity for low achievers to really take a hold of something that interests them and to apply it in a way that will help them be successful in the future. The other thing is that you said plainly that, in essence, you failed. I'm assuming you're not failing the class. No. I hope. And that's a big eye opener versus the standard of the last 100 years of education. So I really support it. I think it's fantastic. Something that I would like to see maybe in the future is partnerships with industries in the community.
Yeah.
would be a big positive with this as well. So, thank you, Austin.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you to Austin, too. I think I remember going to Austin's baby shower, actually. It's been a
Probably.
pleasure watching you grow up and the outstanding young man you've become. What was the first thing that gave you the idea? What was it that spurred the thought?
Well, I actually remember the day. Mrs. McKeag had come back from visiting the Iowa Big School, which is a whole school dedicated to what I'm trying to get going here. But yeah, she came back and had all these great things to say about it, how these kids were trying to develop a tree that glows in the dark instead of street lamps, and I just thought it was so cool how the kind of freedom they got, and being able to do what interests them. And at first I was kind of bummed out about it because it's like, I can't do that. I wish I could go here. But then I thought, well, why not? So then now we're here. I guess.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm so excited about it.
Thank you.
I mean, it's exceptional. It's exactly what we want our children and our young adults to be leaving school with, is the ability to figure it all out and have it all, like Austin, have it all together, have a direction, have tried it all. Tried their hand at a lot of different things.
Well, and I would say this, I would, after hearing about your experience and all that we've been hearing about project-based learning, I would definitely be in favor of opening up a class such as what you're suggesting, and in listening to your description of your path in which you've journeyed. First of all, thanks for knocking on Mr. Johnson's door and taking the initiative, because I think, all of that will help us develop that program going forward. But as I listen to you, you sound like a young man that's in a business setting, saying a proposal about some new product, not a student, which is what the goal is to prepare young men and women for their futures in a real world experience. So I think it's all been very helpful, and I think you'll go far because of the experience. You'll be able to apply a lot of that moving forward, hopefully.
Thank you.
And my comments would be that I'm really happy to see that you had the initiative to continue on with it and to try to make it work, and then you admitted that it didn't work or wouldn't work, and that's part of life. There's things that happen that don't work, in real life, really. But yet you didn't give up. You went on, you're continuing on, you're trying to make it a class now for more other students in the Charles City High School and leave a legacy with the school. So I'm very proud of you for
Thank you.
attempting it and continuing on with it. So.
Thank you.
Would close in saying that your actions and project that you've done is what we'd like all students in the district to work on and accomplish. You did admit that you were not successful in completing your project the way you initially had thought about. However, two things come to mind. I believe it was Thomas Edison who took 100 times to get the light bulb correct, and it wasn't 100 failures, it was 100 different ways that it didn't work and then he needed to move forward. Also, I think of WD-40, which is
There we go.
aptly named because it was the 40th formula that the company attempted to have a water disbursement. So just because you were not successful at your initial goal doesn't mean that you weren't successful in learning
Thank you.
in the project. So look forward to hearing more from you and Mr. Johnson in the future, and I do believe you will leave your mark upon the school district. Thank you, Austin.
Thank
Thank you,
Thank you
Austin,
again,
very much.
everybody.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is lab classroom presentation.
Well, I wish I went first. I feel like Austin's going to show me up there. So, thank you, Austin. I hope you've inspired other students and you continue to inspire me for our work here at the elementary building. So, Justin's going to pull up the presentation, and Marcia and I are kind of splitting some duties because we're going to each take a presentation tonight, and then we're going to join forces with a grade alike. So I'll talk about lab classrooms, which will lead into the curriculum development process, which leads into the grade alike. So Justin, do you have a clicker? Awesome. So we want to talk a little bit about lab classrooms and our executive coaches that we actually started about this time last year through the selection of maybe who the teachers were going to be. And we've shared some information with you before about kind of the purpose for that, but I want to just kind of remind you a little bit of what is the lab classroom in the classroom and out of the classroom, what has been the purpose. And really there was so many to list, but I tried to highlight just a few here. And then I'm going to go through, not all of these individually, but we'll go through them a little bit more in depth and talk a little bit more about those. So we wanted to really work on strengthening and tightening our alignment to the Iowa core. And we met with Dr. Cox and the executive coaches. They're listed down at the bottom there, Linda Garlinghouse and Pam Argotsinger. And we just want to shout a little public thank you to them as well, because they have been huge resources, not only for our lab classroom teachers, but for Marcia and myself, and then for the district as a whole. They've met with Dr. Cox and the rest of the admin team as well. And so we're seeing impacts rippling out into the district level also. And then we selected our second grade team, Tammy Howell, who focused on literacy, Shannon Venz on math, and then our fourth grade teachers were Diane Sandy on literacy and Tori Muller on math. And so what we were looking at was really how could we embed the professional learning, and it really ties into, this is the Iowa Professional Development Model, and I thought I'd bring that up because it really ties into what Iowa has said of how do we continue to improve teaching and learning experiences. And some of the pieces you can't really see on those ongoing, the little chevron there and the boxes, it really is about researching, planning, collaborating, and instructing, and it's just an ongoing process. And that was one piece that we were really hoping to really put into the lab classroom, is that this was an embedded professional learning experience. It's very non-traditional. You didn't go to a conference or have a presenter come and then go back and try it and then come back. This was really ongoing. And so with that, they've had a lot of time in and out of the classroom. We've been fortunate to have Pam and Linda kind of instructional coaches that have just kind of sidled up right next to our teachers, and were able to provide instruction to the teacher as they went, instruction to the students, and then came back to admin team and kind of said, if we're looking at rolling this out whole staff, this is some things that we need to consider. And again, that goes back to the whole idea of the lab classroom, that it really is a place to experiment and not necessarily model, because we've made, just like Austin mentioned, we made a lot of mistakes along the way, but they're learning. It's a learning process. And so we wanted to just make sure that we continue to improve that learning process as we looked at rolling it out whole staff. Really, we're focusing on the student experiences. What were the students experiencing during literacy? And there we focused on, and continue to focus on, the workshop model, the reading and writing workshop model, where it's about mini lessons where the teacher would model a strategy, work with the small groups, practicing that strategy at a level that they can read and access the curriculum, and then also individually conferencing with students as well. And I think you heard, I think Jason, you might have mentioned about, the high achieving and low achieving, and really what we're looking at here is how can we get all students to access the curriculum at a level where they can learn and do the problem solving like Austin was doing too. And so the big daddy of this year has been really the math and the problem-based learning through inquiry and using word problems to really learn. On top of that, we're still building math fluency and accuracy, but it has been a really great process. I can just share kind of personal stories of my two kids, third grader and a first grader. My third grader, I would say, is a little higher achieving, and this has been difficult for him because he thinks it happens this way. This is how I know. This is a procedure. Why are you asking me to explain it? But on the other hand, other students, my first grader, I think he's still doing fine, but he is like flourishing because he gets to explain everything that maybe before he would have gotten incorrect. And so I think this is just so exciting because it's just aligning so well with the project-based learning, and that's happening at the secondary level too. And hopefully we're producing those kind of learners so that they keep growing as they move along. This really another component was about collaborative learning, not just with students in the classroom as social learners, but also with teachers. We've had tremendous opportunity to have our lab classroom teachers open the door, and they allowed other teachers to come in and observe. And that's a tough thing to do, and so we just want to give them a thanks to all 4 of our lab classroom teachers for doing that, because that's hard to have someone come in and watch. We weren't there to evaluate, or we were just there to learn. We really were there to observe the students and learn how they learn. And so we were able to do that during the classroom observations and just increasing our efficiency and use of our PLC time as well. And this is a 4th grade team at PLC, diving in, working hard there. Last slide here, just a little bit about kind of support and sustainability. Obviously, we need to continue to dedicate time and allocate money and funding for this. We also need to continue to have that growth mindset, and we kind of called it and learned about intellectual courage to take the risk to learn and think outside the box and be willing to make mistakes with each other. Some indirect impacts that we've seen as an admin team more have been use of PLC time, collaboration time, and how we build that in our schedule. How do we build that in before and after the schedule? We've seen it also around how does that impact our professional learning plan for the entire year? How does it impact the simultaneity between literacy and math? We've seen some indirect impact on possibly some ideas for the TLC grant and what that might mean, because our executive coaches really were acting in a way for teachers as instructional coaches and kind of being that buffer between the admin team and the classroom as well. And so how would that look for the TLC model? And then we'll talk about here more deeply is about the math curriculum process and our selection of math resources that we're looking at. I think that was it. Okay, that's it. Made it brief for you guys, so.
Thank you.
Anything you want me to highlight on that I didn't share? Or questions about it?
Anything for Mrs. Shannon?
That's very good.
Very good, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I'll let Marcia talk about the math curriculum process
We'll move
then.
on to agenda item 7, math curriculum, with Mrs. DeVore.
As Kara mentioned, one of our major focuses over the past year has been on math. Just to give you a little bit of background, going into our work with the lab classrooms and with the executive coaches, the last elementary textbook adoption was in 2004, and since then we've had a number of events, both nationally, statewide, and locally, that have impacted those things, starting with the adoption of the Iowa Core in 2008, and then the blending of the Iowa Core with the Common Core state standards in 2010. In the fall of 2013, and then Washington Elementary was designated a SINA school in the area of mathematics, and Lincoln Elementary in the fall of 2014 was designated a SINA school in the area of mathematics. So we knew that this was an area that we wanted to focus on, and that was, again, part of our impetus in bringing in our executive coaches and the implementation of the lab classrooms for the fall of 2014. We knew that part of our job with these lab classrooms was to build the foundational understanding of mathematics instruction. And so that started with a lot of professional learning. On this slide, you'll see in front of you some of the reading that we did as administrators and lab classroom teachers, which then broadened out to our entire staff. We realized that we really needed to beef up the professional learning of all of our teachers around the area of mathematics. And so these were some of the foundational pieces that we've spent the past year reading and processing and digging into. With that professional learning, we have established as a faculty some guiding principles that we truly believe research supports in terms of mathematics instruction. And I think in your board handout, we shared that guiding principles document with you, but it basically focused around the idea that with teaching and learning that students would have individual and collaborative experiences that would promote their sense of being able to, their mathematical reasoning and their mathematical ideas. In terms of access and equity, we want all students to be able to access that universal core that we talk about in terms of teaching. We want to provide that for students. We want to make sure that they have both conceptual understanding and procedural understanding. They need to know why a certain procedure works. In terms of a curriculum, we knew that it was important for the mathematics concepts to develop alongst a thought-out progression and making connections between those pieces. We also knew that it was important in terms of tools and technology that our students use those mathematical tools and technology as essential resources to develop their mathematical understanding. And then we also wanted to use assessment in terms of not only informing us of students' learning, but using it to inform for student learning, to inform our instruction. And finally, we focused around that professionalism piece. We wanted a mathematics curriculum that where teachers were held accountable for the mathematical success of every student, and that involved professional growth for every teacher to grow their understanding of mathematics. From that, we knew that we needed to come back and look at the resources that we were using for our mathematics curriculum. And so we developed a math curriculum team. This team consisted of representation from every grade level, including special education. It was a mix of teachers in terms of experience and building. Both principals served on the team as well as our executive coaches. Because we spent a significant portion of the school year building the mathematical understanding of our entire faculty, this team, when they came together, really focused their work. They took those guiding principles that the staff had established and developed a tool to help them evaluate mathematics resources. And then they did the hard work of using that tool to compare 4 different resources. And in conclusion, they felt strongly that the mathematics series investigations into number, data, and space really met the guiding principles that the faculty had established. And so we're sharing that with you today. Because both Lincoln and Washington were designated SINA schools, there is SINA funding available to provide those resources, and so we'll be looking at that. We have summer work planned in the area of curriculum, really focusing in at the K2 level the first week of June, and the 3-5 level the second week of June, so that our teachers are prepared and ready with the fall of 2015 to implement this new math curriculum. Questions for either Kara in the lab classroom or in regards to the math curriculum?
I have a question about the math curriculum. Does it employ, I've heard or I've learned about a spiral method in teaching math, where you learn one principle and you always go back and revisit some of the principles that you've learned earlier?
There are some series that promote the spiraling piece, where they're constantly changing, where it may be from day, you may focus on geometry one day, and then you'll focus on algebra the next day, and then you'll come back to those pieces. Investigations does not spiral in that sense. However, it has a very strong connection between topics in terms of, if you're talking about patterning in algebra, it ties directly into how they talk about patterning in geometry. So your topics connect. So maybe not jumping every day, but what you learn this 3 weeks in this study is going to connect directly to what you're studying in the next 3 weeks.
Okay, all right.
So, one question, I guess, that popped into my head about both of these, we all hear that teachers are busy all day with students and grading papers and preparing for class the next day and their curriculum for the week and whatnot. When all do you people have time to devote to these projects?
Well, that's
Are you
what-
using the Wednesday mornings?
Absolutely. The Wednesday morning PLC time is incredibly important. The summertime that we've got scheduled here will be incredibly valuable. And as we connect into our next presentation, we'll be talking with Grade Alike, the ability to build common planning time into your daily schedule for a grade level of teachers will be incredibly valuable as we look to implement something like this as well.
I would just add that the calendar proposal for next year, then with that too, having those full days of professional learning time together directly aligns to the need for that extra time, and for this very reason in your answer to your question.
So you're going to be you at the elementary level will be just as busy with this project as what they will be at the middle school and high school level with the project-based learning.
Absolutely. And we have to continue that simultaneity that we talked about too with the literacy, as well as secondary too, but.
Wow.
Anything else?
Before we go on to the grade alike, I forgot to mention 2 items for the lab classrooms and the executive coaches. As far as the plans for the future, I think I either left the slide off or it didn't come up on there. We have plans yet this year to go visit Council Bluffs on May 12th. On Tuesday, we're going to head there, and part of the reason there is Marcia and I have been working in a professional learning network with Council Bluffs and Mosbach, thank you, couldn't think of her name right away, and their administration team as well. And so there's been some strong ties there for our learning, but then also they are at a place where we can learn a lot as a teaching staff from their teachers. So we have that in place, and we also have plans then to roll this a little bit bigger, the lab classrooms, into involving all second grade and all fourth grade teachers as well. So just wanted to add that in there, that we're looking at using that planning time, or using our rest of our team as our planning, partners too, so.
Okay. Very good.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you.
moving on to agenda item 8, consideration of Grade Alike Elementary School, and this is only an information item this evening.
Are you going to run while Justin is setting up? I know that board members have received some feedback from a couple of parents with questions about transportation and how that will be addressed with the Grade Alike academics, and the concern about transitions from one building to the next to another building. So today I spent a couple of hours putting together screenshots of the academic performance of the students in the 10 school districts larger, well, the school districts that are up to 400 students larger than Charles City. And it's going to run here on a PowerPoint that we'll make available at our website as well for people to access. And it shows all of the buildings, all the school districts where they have Grade Alike. So they're going from a K2 building to a 3.5, or a K2 to a 3.4, maybe a K1 to a 2.5, any of those variations, and then on to middle school. And it gives you a chance to see their proficiency scores. And I've also included in there, if they made a switch from a K-5 system into a realigned one when that took place, and you'll notice that in the chart also. And the overriding question the overriding statement that the administrative team and I have really been intentional about for the past couple of months is bringing us back to our mission. And if our mission is to provide an environment in which students and staff can achieve their maximum potential, then the question is, as we look at our current achievement scores, are we meeting that mission? Are the students at Lincoln and at Washington achieving their maximum potential? And I'll let you draw your own conclusions as you look at what other school districts have done and how they have the same transitions that we're proposing to have. And we think that this is best academically. You know from financially, we've got fourth grade sections at Washington next year that if we don't make any changes, will be 32 students per section, while at Lincoln they'll be at 20. We know that kindergarten right now is up to 25 at Lincoln in one section, because we wouldn't split that into 12 and 13. And at Washington, they would be in the 18 or 19 range. So you have the inefficiencies of trying to maintain 2 K-5 buildings, the strategic nimbleness that comes with doing a grade alike so that we can be more responsive with the way that we react to things like the loss of 47 students or inadequate state funding. It also gives us the opportunity, looking ahead to 2017, and this would be at the Washington building where the K2 is going to be. You know, when that third grade retention comes in, that is part of the governor's education reform initiative, if we can be intentional about the activities that we do with grades K1 and 2 while they're at Washington and get them into a strong transition to third grade at Lincoln, then we don't have to have students who are being retained because they haven't met those proficiency targets. So I'll turn this over to Kara and Marcia to share the results of the parent meeting last week and any other information that they've got for you.
As we shared with you when we first came to talk, we did hold a parent meeting last Thursday, April 23rd, from 6:30 to about 7:15. We had about 21 parents attend, 16 staff members, many of whom are also parents, 2 board members, and the press was there as well. Kara and I shared with them the same presentation that we had shared with you previously. We fielded approximately 7 to 8 questions from the parents that were there. In terms of that evening and then just general feedback that we have gotten from parents, there seem to be 2 main areas of concern that parents bring up. The transition, and even more specifically, not necessarily the transition between second grade and third grade, but how are you going to transition my child this year? My child who has been going to one school for several years and is now going to switch over to another one. And then the second area that we've had a lot of conversations, or most of our comments around transportation. So I'm going to let Kara talk a little bit about the transitions, and then I'll talk about transportation.
I just want to elaborate that I really appreciated the parents that did come to the meeting that night. It gave us a chance to hear face-to-face and have conversation. Had a great conversation, got to sit down with some parents and talk through concerns, did some problem solving, and we took to heart everything that they had to say. I just really enjoyed that. So thank you to those that came. With the transition, I keep looking there for a slide information, but it's not there, it's here. With the transition, Marcia and I have put out a tentative schedule for time and dates of when we would transition students in the sense of when we might go over and meet our new teachers and our new students that are going to be with us. So we've looked at dates that have allowed for them to travel on the bus over to each building, so they'll know if they have to ride a shuttle, they'll know what that shuttle will be like, so they'll know where to get off and where to get on. Allows them to have tours of the building, also allows them to have lunch at the building, recess at the building, and we're hoping that we can get creative with the recess and lunch so that there's some cooperative learning and some games involved, and so it's not just go out and play now, and then most importantly getting to meet their future teacher and staff, and I know there's some concern around meeting even the new administration or new counselors, so we're going to provide that opportunity that day. I think Marcia is about hour and a half, maybe hour and 45 minutes of time for them to kind of intermix and mingle. We do hope that we will have the rosters by then, so that way when they do meet their new teachers, they'll actually know who their teacher would be for the next year. And we have our teachers already working on, having and sharing information with each other about strengths and kind of things to know about the students, and then they're going to put that together and compile and create those class rosters. So our hope is to have that ready to go, so when they transition, they'll know who their teacher will be. So that's really good to have. I think that's it. Is that it for the transitioning? Yeah, I think so.
In terms of the transportation question, one of the things that we intend to do this spring is put out a survey to all elementary students regarding their intended transportation methods for arrival and dismissal. We think that'll be very beneficial in helping us determine just how many kids are planning to use a shuttle, how many parents are looking at some of these different routes. And so we've talked about that with Transportation Director Jerry Mitchell. Jerry's done some great work for us already in terms of looking at what currently exists in terms of our routes, and he feels that existing shuttles schedules will work very well. We know that as we look at those pieces, we have plans working on plans for places where parents who maybe are waiting for the shuttle to come from Lincoln to Washington, where they can wait. If they maybe have a first grader that they've picked up and they're waiting for a fourth grader to come over on a shuttle, they can do that. And we're looking at just kind of planning out those pieces. So those plans are definitely in the works so that they can be out and available for parents as soon as possible.
And one thing with that, the survey will really help us know, we have kind of in our minds already where we would have parents be sitting and waiting, but we want to make sure that we don't have that established and then come August and September realize we have got way more parents than what we thought might be waiting there. So that's why we're kind of looking at that initial survey. So, and then just with that, then we would also know maybe how many people we might need supervising the area for, whether it's the library while we wait for the shuttle to come over, or whether it's the front, the vestibules or whatever. So we just really want that information as much as parents can plan already. We want that information to plan a couple of those things. So. And that was a parent suggestion. So I see it was a great suggestion, and I think it's a great idea. It's going to help us a lot.
Then probably the number one question we've been fielding from staff is around the actual physical movement from one classroom to another. We are in the process. We're meeting with Jerry Mitchell tomorrow morning to kind of sit down and talk about this is some of the needs that we see, and so that we will have a very I always like to call it a domino effect plan. Once you get the first piece out, you can start moving all of those classrooms, and we think we can make that happen very, very efficiently. Do you have any particular questions or concerns for us in regards to the Great Alike proposal?
The one thing that I believe that people aren't fully aware of is that with the parking up at Washington, the Buildings and Grounds Committee has allocated, I'm not sure about the dollar, $105,000 to redo the parking at Washington, to add stalls and reconfigure the coming in and going out in the flow pattern up there. So perhaps if we could get a diagram of Jerry's parking lot posted on our website or posted on Facebook somewhere, that might ease some of the problems with people having at parking at Washington and or the flow pattern up there, because we all realize that that's been a problem for a number of years. It never gets any better, and thus, it was last fall that this winter we had allocated that $105,000 to go towards parking again, to add stalls for public and to redo the flow pattern out in front of the building to make the pickup and drop off and pick up, whatever, easier. So, I want to make sure that we get that information out to the public. that would be good.
Yeah, that will be good. And one piece we'll add to that is once we get that information back from the survey, then we will be very specific with parents on, if you are traveling, if you're picking a parent up in Lincoln and you're coming to Washington to get your child, here's where we strongly encourage and suggest the route you take and where you park and that to help with that flow. So we'll kind of have those all designated, and we've got that in our head, but like we said, we just don't want to say this street and then we end up getting 40 more vehicles than what we anticipated. And so we've got to help the city out with that too. So yeah, we'll designate it for sure.
And will you explain, because I know one of the questions I had, that a parent was concerned about teachers being there. Who were you going to convince to come in early to be with the kids? Would you explain somehow the teacher schedules are already staggered so that we do have?
We would have a number of different options in terms of supervision. Our teaching staff all have other duties as assigned. Teachers currently come in from, their work hours are from 7:30 to 3:30, 7:45 to 3:45. We also have instructional assistants with staggered work hours that we would look to make sure that we have that supervision, because I think I've said before, we take student safety very, very seriously, and so we want to make sure that we have those appropriate supervisions in place.
Thank you.
This general comment that I had to make is that what I've seen and what I've tried to be very conscious of throughout my time on the board is recognizing that it's my responsibility and our responsibility to, when questioned, justify either our vote or our feelings or what we're going to do at the board table. And this is certainly one, a topic that generates a lot of question. And I know that all of us have received emails questioning some things, seeking clarification in that. One of the overriding themes I've seen in a number of places is a feeling from some folks that they are being either ignored or that nobody's listening, that we've made our decision and that we're just going to ram it down their throat. And in my opinion, that could be more far from the truth, but what I'm seeing is that people are disappointed in the response that they're getting from, whether it be board members or whoever it may be, staff, whatever. First and foremost, people just want to be heard. So I hope that we all take our responsibility to respond to those comments and questions seriously. I've tried to work hard to provide justifications of why I support or don't support portions of this proposal, and the response has been good. There are a number of things, and I've said at other meetings why I support portions of this, and it's important for me personally to be able to justify those with facts, figures, whatever it may be, and I hope that people appreciate that and recognize that. There are a couple of things that are difficult to support with facts or figures. One of them, because we don't have them yet, and one of them is, the transition this year to next year, and that we're somewhat rushed in this process. For the next meeting, something I would like to see is the transition plan. What are, kind of laid out. What are we going to do between the 11th and the end of school if this is approved? How we're going to soften that transition for those kids next year. That I think would help ease some concerns. I have encouraged as many people as possible to contact Jerry if they have specific questions or concerns. Jerry seems very willing to be open to suggestions, comments, questions, and that for the transportation issue. Because like you hit on, those are two very common things that I continue to get in my email box or out in the public. I was somewhat disappointed. I understand people are busy. I was disappointed in the turnout last week. But I do understand that people are busy. I hope that the availability of the videos help, but I strongly encourage people to continue to contact, seek out specific, answers to help them through this process. But all of that being said, I still recognize that no matter what you say, no matter what we do, there will always be people that don't agree and that don't feel it's the best solution, and that we can't satisfy or solve all of the concerns. We can only do our best with what we have, and I feel that we are on that path so far. So, thank you.
I have another question, since I know that all the parents that obviously are not here, because there is none here tonight, will be watching this either on TV, I assume, or on the internet. Would you please, once again, explain why this is happening, as some people say it, all of a sudden? We haven't spent the last year talking about this. It has basically come about in just the last few months as an issue that we're going to pursue for yet this fall.
You know, I think we mentioned in our initial talk with you that conversations around Great Alike have been ongoing both formally and informally for the past decade. I think one of the impetuses to push the conversation forward at this time was that realization of our kindergarten numbers when we started to look at that, which then led to an examination of our fourth grade numbers and a conversation around if we believe that this is in the best interest of student learning. Is it in the best interest of student learning now, a year from now, 2 years from now? Why are we holding off on the possible benefits from this if we feel that this is the right course of action and we feel that we can make the transition happen in the time that we have?
I just wanted to say that, you know, as a member of the board, it's not so much my personal feeling, it's we five all together as a group. And, you know, while it's an emotional topic for a lot of people, you know, I have been sitting here just watching this screen roll with all these numbers, and the data should speak louder than anything to us as to what children are achieving in these Great Alike schools versus, you know, we've got great teachers, we've got great curriculum and so forth, but the question there is, are our students achieving their maximum potential? It looks like there's a whole lot ahead that they can achieve in a Great Alike structure. So hopefully we'll be able to get some more of this summary out to the public or on the website or something, because this really punctuates the need for Great Alike.
Well, and I think it goes back to what, you know, Scott, you're asking about too, is when do you have time to do all of this work? And what we're really looking at is aligning all of our work more efficiently. Right now, we've got 2 people and 2 people, or 3 people and 2 people, and you'll know when you put more heads together, great things happen. And so we're just asking everybody to be on the same page, more unified, you know, team players, and there is great teaching happening at both buildings. But when we come together and have it more unified, and we make sure that the students are experiencing things together, it's just going to be a huge benefit for them. And to me, that outweighs any of the cons of having to run a shuttle or any of those minor details. But
Yeah, absolutely.
I also want to make one final comment about, I had a parent send me some information about some studies on this, and these are, I looked at those studies and I had a chuckle to myself because they're the same studies that Doug Bankston sent me when I was against the single campus. And they have nothing to do with grade school children. They have everything to do with middle school children. They have everything to do with children not remembering where their locker might be, how to unlock their locker, which room they need to go to next. It has nothing to do with just going with all their friends, all the same students they've always been with, to another classroom. There is no, I don't see the correlation there at all. I've read them all, and I read them all again, and it's not there. It's not comparable. The data just isn't in there. As you mentioned before, the data isn't out there.
I think Kara's point that there are going to be pros and cons to any grade configuration. The number one impact for kids is what's happening inside that classroom. And so if we can put a configuration together for our elementary building that has a strong impact on our teachers and the teaching that they're doing inside the classroom, that is where we're going to see the benefit for our students in their academic achievement.
I'm going to go to our forecasting and identifying information need sheets from last week and ask a couple of questions. What are the biggest roadblocks to implementing this? And do we have key ways to work around them?
Well, I just feel like we highlighted on the transportation and the transition.
Okay.
And we'll be happy, we can share it tonight. We can share the tentative transition schedule that we have. Well, we can share it, just don't share it out to staff yet. I mean, we can just show that we've got them all lined up and recess, everything's planned, that's fine. And, you know, we can even share the map of what we are anticipating would work for our travel and our transportation back and forth too. So I think that hits the big ones that they've been really asking about.
And then finally, what other essential pieces of information will help the board make the best decision possible for our district and our students? Do you have additional information that you would like?
Yeah, I would guess that would be the question that we would toss back to you. What are the pieces that you want? Kara and I are in the process of putting together maps that show where the classrooms are. We're putting that transition plan together. We'll be more than happy to bring those pieces to share with you at that May 11th meeting. Scott, you asked what's a roadblock. We know that this is a tight timeline, and so we are doing work as we go. We are confident that we can meet the timeline as it's put together, and we'll get those pieces to you as they come.
The transition plan's one key one for me, obviously. I know a parent, had expressed to me about, parading a kid into an empty building in the summer, and showing them their empty classroom is not always, the best way. And how are we going to implement this? Like I said before, if it's not approved, if approved on the 11th, before the 22nd and the last day of school, and that timeline and how all of that will be pulled together, that would help ease some concerns I have and that have been expressed to me. I think would several of those people would appreciate that.
Any other pieces of information you'd like from administration?
I think you've really touched on them tonight as far as the transition, the plan that you have in place, and then transportation and safety. I think of, maybe older siblings being at one school, trying to meet up with the other siblings that are younger, and then trying to walk home. How will that all work together? And I know you'll get a plan and work with parents on all of that, but safety.
And although it's not probably super feasible, somewhat of a frequently asked questions or Q&A of information that's been gleaned from others. I've had several say that they're not willing to either contact us directly or come to a meeting or whatever it is, but they're more than willing to spread it on social media everywhere. So if there is a recurring theme seen, questions and answers type of thing to address some of those concerns would be something that would be beneficial to be able to point to and say, here's your concern. Like I said, it may or may not be very feasible, but thank you.
Little extra work for you maybe, but it'll help with the public relations and the information out there for us and the parents to digest this whole process and make a decision on May 11th for us.
And we all realize that the transition is very important. We all agree on that. And
Absolutely.
we all know that that's a vital ingredient to this whole equation. And if we don't have that in place, it won't work. So that will be important for us to agree and know that that is all set in place, ready to go. And I have every confidence.
Anything else on Great Lake? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we'll take a short
Are you gonna
recess.
take any public comment if there is any?
No, do we have any public comment? No. So we'll take a short recess before we move on to agenda item 9 for the next presentation. 7:53, and we'll call the meeting back to order and move on with agenda item 9, the the standards-based grading presentation by Principal Mr. Johnson and Mr. Gable.
All right, thanks again. I'm actually flying solo tonight because Mr. Gable and I were talking. This is probably going to be an ongoing discussion. Probably 2 or 3 phases to this information in order to keep the conversation moving, just to kind of give you an update of where we're at and how we've kind of gotten to where we are here in the past year with standards-based grading. So this is going to be one of the bigger things that we take on at the middle school and high school when we talk about changing grading practices. So we're definitely going to be coming back to you with kind of some joint presentations about the middle school and high school. Tonight, just wanted to take a little bit of time and talk about kind of how we ended up taking on standards-based grading to really get the ball rolling, getting some buy-in with middle school and high school staff. Had a great conversation, a G-chat actually today with Lorraine about while I was working on this, and I'll admit I was kind of crammed at the last minute trying to get it done. And she jumped on and started looking after I emailed you guys and shared the link, and we went back and forth for a little bit. So I thought that was pretty neat. That was a new experience for me, but
Me too.
it was kind of cool. I mean, I think I changed a couple things because of what you said, so I appreciate that. This is stemming from a presentation that I made at a PD day between some neighboring school districts, North Fayette Valley, Southwind, Sumner, Fredericksburg, and a couple other schools. We're looking for someone to speak on standards-based grading. So I went over and spoke to, it ended up being about 6 different school districts about what our team is doing at the middle school and high school with standards-based grading. So that was a good experience to get out there and share our story a little bit. I shared this with you guys earlier in an email, so you have this presentation and then also the communique of how we're starting to communicate with parents about this. And I know you figured it out already, but I'm going to talk very quickly through this, mainly because you have the information, and then also when we get a little bit deeper into what standards-based grading is, we'll have a little bit more in-depth conversation. But our story started, we have about 15 middle school and high school teachers that are working on adopting standards-based grading in their classrooms. Right now, we're working with a pilot team. Started off literally my first day on the job in in June. I took 6 teachers down to Des Moines to a CBE conference, competency-based education conference. And then the same group and a couple maybe different ones went with Dr. Cox and other administrators. I think, did you all go to Gusky's presentation? Or is that just their principals?
I think it was other principals.
That was, some of the other administrators went to see Tom Gusky, and he's a standards-based grading expert out of Kentucky. And it almost consensus was from those 2 meetings and a lot of discussion was we really needed to take a look at our assessment and our grading and reporting practices within the district. That's okay, you can keep that. So we had a lot of great discussion, and this was my first couple of days. So I was with those 6 teachers, and they spoke pretty openly with me about some of the concerns, and a lot of it they came back excited about what this might bring. So the pilot team approach was used. The emphasis was on Gusky's practice. We used his book, and we've kind of built an action plan from there. There's a list of team members. You can see that on the PowerPoint that I shared with you. We have 15 total, and I think it's growing. Might be 17 or 18, depending on the meeting when we can get everybody together. Couple lists of objectives. We wanted to organize a team plan, an action plan of how we're going to accomplish this. And then we just want a general conversation to increase the awareness about how we can improve grading and reporting at the secondary level. The elementary has been working in some capacity with standards-based grading for some time. It's important that we take those. It's just a little bit different animal the older you get with the students. And we wanted to work to practice them within our classrooms, so each of the people on the team agreed to try it in some capacity in their classrooms and hopefully develop a unit to use along the way. So our process was kind of broken up into 4 phases. We wanted to get buy-in. First of all, we had teachers to really examine what was not going well in grading and reporting in their own classrooms, and then just kind of tackling some of the big questions that surround these issues. This is a very big movement around the country right now. You look on anywhere on any kind of educational chat on Twitter, a lot of the experts out there that talk about project-based learning or inquiry-based learning, they eventually come back to how we grade and report it, and this is kind of where that conversation goes. So this isn't a flavor of the month or anything like that. This is a growing movement. We went to Grant Wood AEA down in Cedar Rapids with a huge team of teachers at the end of March, And two things that really stuck out to us when we went there was, number one, was that we're doing the right work. They felt kind of validated that we're tackling what we're tackling right now, and that from 2 years prior, the number of schools that were attended this conference, about 4 times the amount of schools were represented. So it's growing all over the state. So we feel like we're a couple steps ahead, and we'd like to stay there. This summer is going to be an important summer to make some of the changes to make sure we keep moving forward. So step by step, the essentials to standards-based grading we'll talk a little bit at a later time, and then how does it fit into the big picture of project-based learning, work, profession-based learning, the back-to-school project. These things all come together, and they're starting to see that a little bit more, and we want to make sure that we're communicating that to staff. That's an ongoing effort. So getting buy-in, first thing that we did, and this is what I'm going to kind of go through with you today very quickly, was we took a look at what types of things in grading practices do we need to change or challenge right now. And ooching our way to standards-based grading, that was a popular saying by one of the presenters, so we've kind of used that a little bit. So the highly questionable grading practices, in a lot of our research concerning changing grading practices and what traditional grading has really left us needing more, kind of sums up in these, and I'm going to talk just briefly through each one of those as we go here. So the first one we're going to take a look at is 0%, the interval problem within grading, how 1 0 within a grade book, or the zero myth in general, the no zeros policy if you're familiar with that, and then the practice of averaging. So we have a report card up here, and you can see student A, B, C, and D, and I highlighted the zeros, and particularly with students A and C. And the reason I did that is you can see that A has 90% across the board on all of those assessments besides the 3 zeros. Student C has a lot of hundreds, a couple of tens, and then that 1 0. And then you can see the other ones are 63s across the board, just for the example, and then more of a kind of a progression looking approach to student D. But all of them add up to be the same thing. So in a traditional grade book, they're going to have the same amount of total of points, and therefore the same amount of average. Now to us, right away, that's pretty big red flags. It's not a focus on learning. Okay, it's a focus on averaging scores. It's not a focus on where they're at any given point. You can see that the zeros in this particular example play a pretty big part in those students' grades. Eliminates 3 zeros from student A, and what are we talking about? Okay, so that particular point of averaging and zeros kind of goes hand in hand. Extra credit on assessments instead of do-overs. Traditionally, and I was guilty of this as a teacher, seen it as a student, still have conversations with people about it, but this is one of those that's kind of gone by the wayside at the high school particularly. You do a bunch of work, maybe you don't get the score that you want, teacher says, well, I'll give you some extra credit, go ahead and try this. Do a little bit extra, or bring in a box of Kleenexes and I'll give you the 5 points that you're looking for. It's a silly way to look at it, but legitimately there's stories out there about that. But the point being, when we look at what's more important, extra credit or giving them a chance to relearn what we tell them is essential. And that goes back to is the assessment piece. Standards-based grading forces us to take a hard look at how we assess students. Take a look at the cartoon there. It's one of my favorites. You look at it, the animals lined up across there. All of them are going to get the same assessment. Try to climb that tree. Okay. A lot of different things that we could take from that. I like the way that it looks. Highly questionable grading practices, the practice of averaging, a new look at it right now. Take 2 seconds, 30 seconds. Which parachute are you going, who are you going to choose to pack your parachute? Anybody care to share?
B.
Why are you picking B?
Well, they're continually getting better at what they're doing there. They're improving. I'm seeing all those colors already. I think so.
You're right. Yep. All 3 of them are the same in terms of average. Okay, they all average to be about 70%. Mastery is 60%, so average-wise, they're going to meet mastery according to those numbers. But if you look at student C, they're ending their 7th try at 40%. Even though they average out to master, I'm not letting that person pack my parachute. Okay, the progression of learning, as was stated, is pretty impressive. And then student A, you kind of set back and forth. Kind of a risk. One day they might give 50%, the next day they might be 80. What do we really know? Point being also, we need more information. That doesn't tell us the complete story about those students. Okay? We need to get more information, more communication about what students do and don't know. Another questionable grading practice is combining work ethic and academics. This is a tough one. I know this is probably going to raise some questions with you, and what I did here is, and you can take a look at this on your presentation at another time as I sum it up, an actual conversation that I had just last week with one of our science teachers was centered around this. She was really struggling with a particular student that was just being, I'm going to use Mr. Wolf's term, a jackwagon a little bit. Wasn't getting assignments done on time, not much effort, missing a lot of school. All the big red flags that you have traditionally with a student, this student was having, and then some. So we just have a conversation kind of like we always do to try to get teachers just to say, hey, let's just focus on one of the things. I know you got a lot of things. What have you tried with them? This teacher right away, I said everything, and this particular teacher really does try everything, so I definitely believed what she was talking about. How's he doing academically? Well, if he's there, he's capable. Classic answer. If he just shows up, he's smart enough to do it, I just can't get him there. And then he acts, he's stubborn and insubordinate, and I just can't get through to him. Well, as we start to talk through that, I say, well, it's great. What's your end goal for JJ in this particular scenario? Well, I want him to learn the material. Okay, well, let's focus on that. How can we make that happen? Let's separate all the non-academic parts of it. Bottom line, if this kid was academically speaking, is he capable in your class? Yes, he is. Obviously, the first comeback there is the teachers say, well, how can I ignore the fact that they're late, they don't do the work, they miss deadlines, so on and so forth. We're not advocating that we don't address those concerns. We're advocating that we separate them. Give us an academic sense of where those students are at, and then give us a report on the non-academic requirements of being a successful learner. Separate the two. Because if we really, at the end of the day, if it's an academic side of it, and we really want to know what they've learned or not, we've got to be able to show that, and that's through the academic work. So that's an ongoing process, and I could talk a lot more about that one in particular, but we'll come back to that, I'm sure, at another time. The semester killer, this is an interesting one. This is an excerpt from our grade book. This is a real student. I covered up all the other assignments. Just to be a little bit more discreet, you can see what's highlighted there. Research paper standard 1, research paper standard 2. 82%, which is a B minus, and 71%, which is a C. Literally almost across the board, you can see 1 B minus on this is about a half of the grade book. All the other grades in the class were a B minus or above, mostly A's. And because there was so much emphasis put on that one assignment, you got a B for the class.
That's too bad.
So it goes into the averaging, goes into a lot of those different discussions, but putting all of our eggs in one basket for one particular, and I use the research paper because it's kind of an ongoing discussion with our English department, so they know kind of how I feel about that, and we're working towards how that might happen. At least aligning some certain skills and standards to those research papers instead of, I think it says about 250 plus 95 more. You're looking well over, 300 and some points there on that. So that's the semester killer. It's a different way to look at kind of how we desegregate our grade book a little bit. Homework policies that discourage completion of late/missing work. Another one that kind of coincides. I'm going to ask you a question. Why do struggling students continue to not care if they receive multiple zeros? Why do you think that is? We have a lot of kids that they rack up zeros like they're, why do you think that happens?
I was going to say, do they feel like now, by looking at the grade average, you get a couple zeros and your whole grade tanks?
As soon as they get a couple zeros,
Yeah.
they give up.
You can't dig back out of the hole.
Yep, it's insurmountable. Not to mention, I get a zero, I don't have to do the work.
Mhm.
It's an easy out. Standards-based grading, the punishment is not doing the work, it's having to do the work. I put the grass in the background because there's an analogy that a speaker that I really enjoy uses that, and this actually holds true with me today. I was supposed to go home and mow the lawn and I didn't make it. My wife wasn't too happy about that because our neighbors are probably going to be talking about us. But the point was, if I don't go home and mow the lawn, do I just not have to mow it? No. Eventually, I got to do the work. Eventually, the lawn has to be mowed. And that's a very easy analogy. Another one out there is about taxes. If you don't pay your taxes, the IRS doesn't say, hey, just don't pay your taxes this year. You'll get you next time. Take the zero and move on. No, you got to do things. So in order to actually making kids do the work instead of giving them a 0, we give 0s to teach responsibility. We're not teaching kids responsibility with an English assessment their sophomore year. Okay? The punishment for not doing the work is doing the work, because that teaches them the essential skills we're saying they need to learn. The other side of it, as soon as we give them 0, say that learning wasn't that important. We'll just give you the 0 instead and move on. So we're trying to change that mindset, and this group of teachers in the pilot team has really done a nice job of this. The redo policies and the reassessments has been a really good aspect to that. And then the last one is promoting the notion of objectivity of traditional grading, the objectivity of traditional grading practices. Are we really that objective in our grading? Here's a very interesting study, and I'm going to go through this very quickly. Starch and Elliott decided to figure out how much subjectivity there really was in grading. They gave essays to over 147 English teachers and gave geometry papers to over 128 math teachers and said, grade them based on a traditional percentage and let's compare. Okay? First one with the English paper, the grades ranged, 147 teachers, from 64 points to 98. Within that paper, 15% of the people said that those students failed, while another 12% said they scored at 90% of above on the same papers, grading the same thing. Pretty subjective. Biggest argument they got right off the bat was, well, grading writing is always subjective. It's very hard not to make writing subjective. Okay, so that's where they went to the geometry paper range. That had even a bigger correlation, 28 to 95, and math is supposed to be less subjective. It's a very interesting study. Okay, anyone care to guess when this study was done, besides Dr. Cox, if he knows this one? He's kind of grinning like he does, so. You guessed it, 1912. So a long time ago, there was this aspect of subjectivity and grading. And we continue to look at this in terms of how do we make them less subjective. And standards-based grading allows that to do us. Think about it this way. If you have a grading scale of 1 through 4 on a specific skill, you can create a pretty detailed description of all 4 of those learning levels. Now take that and go 1 through 100 and try to create a detailed description of each one of those levels of when they earn those scores. That makes you look at it a little bit different. The larger the scale becomes, the more subjective it becomes. And that's a problem when you're talking about grading. So we're talking about a new model. You can see the difference between the two, but basically you can see on the right-hand side, we're trying to get to more of a detailed picture of student learning. Rubric-based, doing a lot of work with that. We'll talk more about that later with you. Learning is the focus. Growth mindset. Go back to if you don't get chances to redo and you get the 0s, you're not instilling a growth mindset in those students. Austin Turpin earlier, he failed at what his project was supposed to do, but he did not fail in his learning. In a couple aspects, he wasn't able to prove the standards we wanted to meet, but we'll come back and address those at another time. He could explain to me very articulately 4 specific standards that he learned, and I could articulate to him at what level he learned those. And that's one part of his presentation we didn't get into. And then this process-oriented, some of the different things that we're taking on to get there. Mr. Gable and I will come back and probably bring some team members to share with you. Key point here is that no matter what you do talking about grading and reporting, instruction has to change too. And it has to be aligned to standards. You hear a lot about the Iowa core standards, so it just makes sense. If we're working with core standards, maybe we should adopt standards-based grading if you want to think about it. That's simply how do we break down these standards into levels of learning, progressions of learning, and let's go from there. We have to align that, and that's something we've been focusing really all year long on the middle school and high school. So it's a great initial step into standards-based grading and into project-based learning. So we feel good about that. And then take a look at the 10 things that we're doing in different capacities to move forward with standards-based grading. Our district action plan, this is what we've accomplished in 2014-15. When we come back in the fall and talk to you again, this is what we'll take a look at with you. Any questions? Covered it that well. It's very good.
Good job.
All right, thanks, guys.
Well, I do want to say one thing. I think that the approach you're taking by doing the letter to the parents and the students and putting it all out there up front is really the way to go, because this is a big change on the horizon and good for everybody to know up front and prevent any miscommunication or any problems with the change. Yeah, nice job.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
One of the things that I mentioned to Dr. Cox when we took the break was that in the year and a half plus since I've been back on the board, this is probably the most interesting hour and a half board meeting I've attended, because we've learned all kinds of wonderful things going on within the district with students and education. We spent a lot of time over the last year and a half plus on buildings and $18 or $19 million projects, but I like this part of the job as well, probably more.
I agree.
So thank you.
Yes,
Moving on to agenda item 10, the 2015-16 school calendar. And that would be Dr. Cox.
So we have taken input from students, staff, community members, parents, school board members at the SIAC meeting, the School Improvement Advisory Committee. We have listened to Facebook comments from parents and community members. We have taken input from staff directly through email, made some revisions to the calendar, and the one that you see before you has responded to those inputs from the community. It does have a start date that remains at August 27th. Again, August is a much hotter month than June historically, so teachers would come back on the 24th, that Monday of that week. We'd have 3 days of in-service. All students would begin K-12 on Thursday, August the 27th, and then June 2nd is intended to be a fixed date. We've got 3 dates in January, February, and April that are full-day professional learning that could be used if we needed to make up lost days due to snow. We didn't have a single one of those this year. I should knock on some wood somewhere. We still have an outside chance at crazy weather in May. It was only a couple of years ago we had that. Any of the professional learning days that would be used as a school day then would be made up at the end of the school year, because those are contractual days. So there's a difference between the school calendar of 1,080 hours versus the 187 contract days that teachers have. Spring break aligns with NIAC, Northern Iowa, Iowa State, and the University of Iowa next year. That doesn't happen all that often. Trying to think what else. Parent-teacher conferences we are going to do on Mondays from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. so that we can hit 2 different working shifts for parents, give them more opportunities in one day to attend conferences. The administrative team and I will be looking at some alternate ways to engage parents, and if this doesn't yield better results, we'll look at something different for 2016-17. I feel pretty good about this calendar, that it's responsive to our need for continued investment in our teaching staff. We've got a lot of great things going on, as President Dyke just mentioned, the last hour and a half of really hearing about our academic initiatives going on. And in September, the 28th and 29th, we have a speaker coming in, a national speaker, to do training with our secondary staff on project-based learning. That's why those 2 dates are in there. Elementary staff will focus on math, and we are still considering an option in which potentially the K-5 staff would come in on the Friday before we come back to school, so August 21st, and have just a non-contract day, one of those on September 28th. I want to visit some more with our elementary principals about the pros and cons of that. So that in a nutshell is the calendar, and I would recommend that the board approve the calendar as presented.
This is option number 7.
This is officially option number 7, yeah.
That you've worked through or presented to people.
On the hours, we had
On the
3
hours.
day options as well, so.
I like the ability to start on Thursdays or sometime in the middle of the week. Gives us those first couple of days to get things rolling, everybody know where they're at, and have the weekend and then hit the ground running again. Not sure if that's why you chose that, but I do like that option. I like it. It meets a lot of our needs in the district and for professionals and the students, so.
And I wanna-
What has been our normal start date, or normal, but what previous years, the last couple of years?
The normal start date had been somewhere around August 20th.
Okay.
And with the governor's signing the law, I don't know, 2 weeks ago or so at this point, August 23rd is now the earliest that any school can start. It's a Sunday, so August 24th would be the first day of school this year. And there are no more waivers, so you can't ask to begin before. You could ask to have year-round school in a balanced calendar format, but that only applies to K-8. You can't do it for high school students. And I'll also point out on the calendar that it aligns with our trimester system. So by starting August 27th, we can finish right at Thanksgiving and then start the second trimester on the Monday following Thanksgiving and end a week before spring break. Would have been ideal if spring break was a week earlier, but it's not. So it really worked out well for our academic structure here in Charles City.
Could you one last time explain the distinctly different purpose of the late starts versus the all-day? Because that's a recurring complaint, I
Certainly.
would say, is that, people's understanding was that they replaced the all-day professional learning with late starts. Could you one last time explain that?
Certainly. We are trying to be responsive. We're working on being responsive to the needs of students on a frequent basis. And so Wednesdays are really intended to be a response to formative assessments, how are kids progressing, what do we need to change and modify on a frequent basis. The full-day professional learning opportunities are meant for going deeper into subjects like project-based learning, into the math curriculum that the elementary principals talked about, things that we can spend the entire morning, potentially a little bit in the afternoon, focused on a topic, and then have collaboration time around that. But there are two distinct purposes, and we really need to have both if we're serious about creating an opportunity where all students and staff can achieve their maximum potential.
I agree. I think that's a great opportunity. And one of the things that comes with that thought or about the all-day is concerns about, what do people do with their kids during the day on those days and daycare situations and that. An informal conversation I had with a local church youth director was, well, maybe that's an opportunity for us to host an all-day something, or maybe it's an opportunity for the Clover kids to have an all-day something those days. So I think that hopefully our community will also be creative to offer other things for kids those days that our teachers are working to.
And listening to parent response, we moved some of those Wednesday full days, aligned them to federal holidays. So Veterans Day, Martin Luther King Day, President's Day are now all day in services. Many parents don't have to work on those days, so they can be home with kids, extended weekend on the Monday holidays for them. The Wednesday prior to Thanksgiving went from a vacation day back to an in-service day. So for families, they can go ahead and travel if grandma lives out of state or other relatives that they're going to visit. So right there are 4 of the professional learning dates that we've really been intentional about trying to make it more family-friendly.
I would agree. I think that change that you made with those professional development days has been real good, and I think you've struck a nice balance between what teachers need and what parents, want and what they're asking for. And, the reason we're hearing about, well, what about these Wednesday late starts, and that was supposed to be, replacing the full day or half day professional development. And it's true. The board did tell that to the community when that was adopted. But as we've seen, education has changed so much, and just this meeting alone and the things that you've summarized, we've got to have more time for teachers to teach learn their craft so that they can incorporate all of these new methods into the classroom. I think it looks good.
I just wanted to make one comment. I had a parent come up to me and say, what do I do with my children on all these days now that there's this professional learning? Now I have to work. I can't take the days off of work. And I remind her, I says, well, don't you have a weekend when you go out, babysitter? Well, yes. well, they'll be out of school that day too. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Well, yes, they will be out of school that day too.
Yeah, I think as we move forward into adopting this next year, if there's a way to inform parents of the options that are available for their children, if they don't have grandparents around or they're newer to the community, they don't know about Clover Kids or so forth, I think that would be helpful to them. You know,
Yeah,
I
if-
think the community will respond. I'm
Yeah.
hoping they will all respond with the programs that are needed for the kids.
Yeah, if there are some things that crop up that are all-day things, if we can help to advertise them, send them home in folders, things like that, it would be, in my opinion, beneficial.
Actually, Robert, that's one thing I hadn't thought of. From all of the conversations and things you've heard from parents of elementary children, well, what do I do with my kids? Well, the high school kids aren't in school either that day.
Well, there's a whole lot of eighth graders that have taken a babysitting
And there's a
course
whole
that
lot
will
of eighth
probably
graders
wouldn't
available,
mind
so-
putting those skills to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are ways to solve problems. We just need to
Yeah.
think about those and
Maybe that
communicate them.
babysitting list, yeah, babysitters list.
One final comment that I fielded once or twice, and I know a couple of us have, is the all-day parent-teacher conferences, or most of the day, really needed. And to illustrate that, my wife talked about 5 of the parents or families of the 19 or 20 kids in her class needed to reschedule, and it didn't work because of their work schedules. They had to come in early in the morning before school, over lunch hour, whatever it was, that this opportunity would really meet the needs for a number of second or third shift parents that don't always have the opportunity to come at the historic times that have been scheduled. So.
Yeah.
We haven't talked much about that, parent-teacher conferences and why we're going, I know, to make it more, but I don't think we discussed the fact that the attendance of parent-teacher conferences is dropped considerably this grade, or, you know.
That's, across the country, that the more opportunities that parents have to access grades online, and the busier the people have become, elementary still has a really good attendance turnout, but it drops off at the secondary level.
So this is our attempt to give parents an opportunity to participate again.
More opportunities to fit into their busy
Schedule.
schedules too and we do have a lot of parents and working people in town who don't just work during the day, second and third shift at a number of places, so this ought to help with that. Are you ready for a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the calendar as presented.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the 2015-16 school calendar as presented. Any further discussion?
I just wanted to tell Dr. Cox, thank you. This being option number 7, I can only imagine the amount of time that you spent developing this calendar, and also thank you for listening to all the parents and the citizens who've made comments and making the adjustments.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
And finally, we were down to 2 comments on the Facebook page, or 1 comment really instead of the 34. So
Yeah.
we must have made some
We did it.
changes.
You did it. Thank you.
We'll have roll call vote then?
Dyke,
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Frisbee,
Yes.
Maycumber.
Yes.
Winterick.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0. Agenda item 11, Food Service Management Company request for proposal. You taking that?
I'm under the understanding that the 2 board members on the committee might be leading this charge.
Okay.
You want me to read it?
No. We've had a committee of 6 people
Yeah.
involved in food service visits, which Lorraine and Robin and I have talked about at previous board meetings. The state extended the deadline for the RFP, the request for proposal, until April 30th due to the continuing stalled state supplemental aid discussions at the Iowa State Legislature. And so because we had an extended timeline that we didn't know that we were going to have, there's an opportunity to still put out an RFP for food service. So Lorraine and Robin, if you want to jump in with any comments.
Sure.
It was, or is, the bulk of the material we were presented.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
In
it
email,
is.
so-
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Oh, my gosh, yes, that's quite an RFP, isn't it? But just to backtrack where this all started, this discussion about food service, Terry had put together this bit of information that I made a copy for each of you in front of you. It shows the food service fund profit and loss from years 2010 all the way through 2014. And you can see here that, you know, and during some of these years, we did have some increases in food service costs or food service prices, as well as the costs went up as the transition went to the new program that's in place, with the new foods, fresh foods and so forth. But the thing that really caught the board during these years was that the profit loss or the expense of this program was such that, you know, those numbers were really diminishing greatly year after year, month after month. We kept watching the lunch sales, the lunch revenue drop. Kids weren't eating. Why weren't they eating? You know, what's going on with the program? And so as we've gone to some of the conventions over the last few years, we've zeroed in on some of that food service education that we've been able to receive about what are other schools doing. We took the initiative to form this committee and go out and see some of the schools, which we've been reporting on an ongoing basis, what we've been doing. Our committee, as we've been meeting recently, had found out that we did have possibly an opportunity to file this RFP. We did come up with some food service goals, of which I can share some with you. That is a full-time food service director, an update in that job description, a variety of the quality entree options at the middle school and high school, the adoption of the salad bar and an optional entree, the increase in fresh fruits and vegetable offerings, a goal to increase our food service participation, possibly adopt a farm-to-school component, adopt a nutritional academic component, you know, assess and update equipment as needed. So there's a lot that's gone into this, and I think the fact that the state has been dragging their feet has worked in our behalf here, because we can go ahead and file this RFP, put this out for a bid. Doesn't mean necessarily that we have to accept anything, but it does provide us with an excellent opportunity to move forward should it all match up with our goals.
Yep,
So-
well said. After touring the other schools, we did, as with our education and wanting to improve our education opportunities, there is an opportunity for us to increase food offerings for our students also, along with educational opportunities. And that's brought us to where we're at right now.
So it's our request to file this RFP with some of those goals in mind that we discussed, and we're open for discussion.
On page 1 of your multi-page document, the RFP, under section B, request for proposal, it appears there are some blanks that we need to fill in for date and time for proposals to be received, or am I misinterpreting that?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that might
Well,
still need to be filled
Terry,
in.
as our exhibit, you didn't give us a completed RFP. You just gave us the, correct?
Yeah, it needs to be fully completed. I don't know that they'll accept it unless it's all.
But you
done.
haven't, in our packet, put the fully completed, so there's blanks that will be filled in, yes.
We'll need to fill them in.
Yes.
You are filling them in, or we fill them in?
No, you don't fill them in. I guess. I don't-
Administration will take care of filling
Yeah.
in the appropriate blanks?
I would say Dawn and whoever will have to fill in those blanks.
in order that these be received in a timely manner and
Yeah,
we
and
can
I
continue
think
to move
this-
forward.
Move your mic a little closer too.
I think
I
the,
know.
I think the state will require, when you submit it, I think all the blanks have to be filled in, if I remember right. I think they're particular about.
So the
they'll-
question is, or just for clarification, administration, whoever that may be below us in the chain of command,
Right.
will fill in those blanks and get this mailed out before the deadline if we approve it this evening,
Right.
correct?
Correct.
Okay,
That's the intent.
okay. Well, I didn't know if we needed to fill in any blanks or if there was recommendations to fill in the blanks or who was taking care of that, but that solves that issue. Any questions about the request for proposal for food service?
So this would essentially generate proposals to be put before us for consideration and not necessarily, at this point, commit us to anything.
Exactly.
But by filing it now, we meet the deadlines to have this considered for next year, I assume? for-
Correct.
Right.
For this coming fall?
Yes, for this coming fall. And the development of these goals that we have, it will really help us to hone in on, just what we want these food service purveyors to provide to us too.
Will some of that decision have to be made prior to pink slip time if we end up eliminating some staff on the food service?
No, because the April 30th deadline doesn't apply.
Okay.
So what is the deadline for support staff?
There isn't one.
There isn't
I mean,
one.
They
There's
were
an
1
issuing
year.
of contracts, but we haven't done that yet. So,
And when would it be expected that these proposals are due to us? When would we be considering these?
I believe the timeline had a minimum of 5 weeks of waiting time.
6.
6.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm going off what I remember, so.
You're fine.
There's a real structured schedule to how this operates. So it'll be the first week of June,
June-ish, okay.
minimum.
Contracts aren't generally ready until then anyway?
We don't issue hourly staff contracts.
Okay.
So you're gonna approve the wages tonight, but there's no actual contract. They're at-will employees. You know, they are given a form saying this would be your wages
If we
next
were
year.
to hire you back?
Well, if we
Well,
were not
Or
to,
if we were
if we
to
were-
continue to hire you?
status
back?
quo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the request for proposal application.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the presented request for proposal for food service management. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll have roll call vote.
Walker,
Yes.
Frisbee,
Yes.
Maycumber.
Yes.
Wintering,
Yes.
Dyke.
Yes, motion carried 5-0. Agenda item 12, board organization memberships.
We have been members of ISFIS, the Iowa School of Finance Information Systems, and IASB, the Iowa Association of School Boards, for this past school year. We've benefited from membership in both organizations, and it's the recommendation of the superintendent that the board join both for the 2015-16 school year.
I'll make a motion that we accept the superintendent's recommendation to join both organizations.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to join both ISFIS and the IASB for the next school year as presented. Any questions or further comments? Hearing none, we'll have roll call vote.
Frisbee,
Yes.
Maycumber,
Yes.
Winnering,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0. Agenda item 13, possible additional budget cuts.
We remain in negotiations with the Charles City Community Educational Association. The deadline to issue any pink slips is April 30th, this coming Thursday. If board members wish to issue any additional notices, action needs to be taken tonight. Cuts to non-certified staff can take place after April 30th.
What happens if, as long as they haven't negotiated with us and we're going to arbitration, and the arbitration makes a decision that we're gonna have to make some budget cuts, how do you issue pink slips after that time?
You don't. You make cuts in other areas. So in non-certified staff, since there is no April 30th deadline, we have some positions that we wouldn't fill or some positions that we could cut. You make delayed purchases. You do other types of budget cutting, but after April 30th, then there is no opportunity.
But to protect ourselves for that, could we issue everybody a pink slip?
You could, like they did at Southeast Warren. I find that to be over the top.
Okay.
Uh,
Well, if they haven't come around to meet negotiations,
Well, there was some interesting conversation that I listened to in regard to that. And some of those teachers, with that being done in them, yes, that being done is just an example. There's still the question in my mind, if there's a job opening in another district, won't you take it rather than waiting? Take the sure thing as opposed to waiting to see if they hire you back in the fall. So it will be interesting to see how that unfolds. They might have a lot of openings down there come fall.
Well, if we were to move forward with any more cuts, do we have anything here to look at?
Was there anything in our packet?
We did not include the previous budget cut list, no.
We would have to go back how far to see that? January?
February.
Are there anticipated savings with agenda item 14?
Terry?
Yeah, there would be, because we would probably have a full-time position that's leaving. And if you were to hire a part-time position back, the major savings would be in the insurance.
Okay.
But originally, you had projected that we needed to cut how much?
330.
330, and so far we have cut
318.
318.
I don't recommend cutting extended contracts at this point to save $1,400 here and $1,200 there. I would recommend not replacing a support staff position. We have vacancies right now. We have some other opportunities where if we had to say we need to make some cuts, there are some positions in the support staff area that we can cut that save $14,000 or $18,000 rather than trying to add several little things up.
So whether anyone makes a motion at this point or not, I do believe this was a good conversation for us to have
Yeah, it's a good.
and to review for the public and the rest of the staff as to how this entire process plays out. Because it's been a while since we reviewed this. So,
Well, let's say, now, if you don't have to, okay, if we have until April 30th to possibly issue pink slips, and if we do end up at arbitration, and if we end up with a worst-case scenario, need to cut more money, if we were to cut, let's say, something that is maybe hours of music lessons or something such as that. I don't recall all of the myriad of things that you've had on here. That would not mean a pink slip. It would just mean a.
No, it would.
It would.
Yeah.
Because if we still had music during the summer but reduced the number of hours, it would
The
still?
extended days is
Have to
a
cancel the
pink
contract.
slip process.
Right.
Man.
It
So-
definitely has taken and put us in a really difficult situation with all the work that has been done to accommodate and keep as many positions as we have available, but yet we're left with so many uncertainties. It is very difficult to,
Yeah, if everything would fall into place right now, we're looking at, we need another $12,000, is that correct?
Right.
But if negotiations don't turn out to where we're at and where they want to be at, it could mean another $20,000 or $30,000.
well, isn't it for every
or
1%,
more.
it's
I mean,
$184,000 for every 1%
If
increase they
comes out,
want.
however it comes out, if it's above what our proposal was to the teachers, it's gonna mean some more cuts someplace, of some kind.
I remain confident that we'll reach a fair settlement
Okay,
with our teaching staff.
okay.
Um,
Anticipated timeline? Do you have an
I'll leave it at that. There's a natural ebb and flow as well in any organization, that there are people who life happens, spouse gets transferred, job opportunity comes up, and between now and August, we know there are going to be people who are going to leave us for another school system. That's just the natural thing, that the way that things happen. So there are opportunities to reassess, do we need to refill that position at the same level? Can we achieve some turnaround savings by hiring a relatively less experienced teacher for somebody who might have had more years of experience who's leaving us? I think we can achieve what we're trying to get. And again, I'll just go back to, I'm confident that we will achieve a fair settlement with our teaching staff, that the loss of 47 students this year, which means the loss of a lot of state funding for next year, we're not in a position to give huge raises, but we can find something that's fair and equitable to move us forward as a school system. So I'm not recommending any other certified staff cuts at this point.
Okay. If you think you can handle it without doing that, that's fine.
I guess at this point, I'm confident in relying on the superintendent's judgment and how things may play out in the future with staff. Again, I think the conversation was needed and worthwhile, not only for our benefit, but for others. If there are no motions on the near horizon, we'll move on to agenda item 14, early retirement applications for support staff.
We have an employee who is applying after the March 18th deadline. There have been some extenuating circumstances around this, and so although we had a deadline that you had put in place, administration would recommend that you accept the early retirement application from Joyce Heights as an instructional aide at Washington, and we express gratitude for her years of service, 28 years of service to the Charles City Community Schools.
I'll make a motion that we accept the early retirement of Joyce Heights and echo Dr. Cox's sentiment that we appreciate her 28 years of good service to the school system of Charles City.
Is there a second?
I'll second. I had one question, that although we've certified our budget for next year, this not being known at that time, is, I assume that we're in a position with the management fund to support this?
Right.
Okay.
It would mean 7,000 less in our fund balance at the end of the year, but we'll have plenty in order to do that.
Okay. Excellent.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the early retirement application as presented with the district's gratitude and appreciation for her commitment and years of service to the district. Is there a roll call vote, please?
Winnering,
Yes.
Dyke,
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Frisbee,
Yes.
Maycumber.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0. Agenda item 15 is the master contract with the support staff. Yes?
Yes,
Yes.
I don't have any comments.
Okay. The district has reached a tentative agreement. The agreement is 3.65% total package increase, 43 cents hourly rate increase, and 3% health insurance increase. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the master contract for the support staff at 3.65%.
I'll second that motion, but I'd also like just to make a comment about it at this time, that I think that they were very congenial, or not really congenial, but I shouldn't say congenial, but they worked with us real well with the negotiation committee, and we're able to reach a good contract settlement with them, I believe. I'm happy with it, so.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Been moved and seconded to approve the contract. If there's no other comments, we'll have roll call vote, please.
Dyke,
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Frisbee,
Yes.
Maycumber.
Yes.
Winnering.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0. Agenda item 16, consideration of the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Roll call vote, please.
Walker.
Yes.
Frisbee,
Yes.
Maycumber.
Yes.
Winnering.
Yes.
Dyke.
Yes. Motion carried 5-0. Agenda item 17, important upcoming dates.
May is a busy month. Our next regular board meeting is May 11th, and then you see the 19th, 20th, 24th, 26th. Quite a few activities coming up.
Saturday night, this coming Saturday night?
Saturday night, Excellence in Ed banquet, 5:30.
Any other upcoming dates that need to be noted? Hearing none, we will adjourn at 8:51 PM.